Good morning, my love. Did you have any dreams?
Yes,
Pluto said excitedly.
I made a friend, and I feel brave. I'm ready to tell you something.
Okay, what's going on?
Pluto told his mother about his troubles at school.
I'm sorry to hear that. I love you, and I'm here to help.
She said as she gave him a big hug. Pluto felt safe in his mother's arms.
This is Dr. Mia Rochelle Loudon, also known as Dr. Mia Rowe. Welcome to this episode of Apollo and Pluto's Wish Quest, a companion podcast for my children's flipover book, Apollo's Wish and Pluto's Dream Quest, published by the Vivens Media Group. In my book, bullying appears on Pluto's side of the story. The sting of cruel words, the weight of feeling different, and the courage it takes for a child to speak up. To explore this topic with care and expertise, I spoke with Lindzy Davis, who was named the Montgomery County Public Schools Elementary School Counselor of the Year. Lindzy has built her career around supporting children through some of their hardest moments, helping them navigate conflict, build resilience, and feel seen. We met to talk about what bullying looks like today, tools for adults to respond with compassion and clarity, and why stories like mine matter for the emotional lives of young readers. Enjoy our conversation. Welcome, Lindzy. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You have been honored as Elementary School Counselor of the Year in Maryland Montgomery County Public School Systems, where you have built strong relationship with students, removed obstacles to their success, and created programs that support their social and emotional well-being. Today, we will talk about bullying, which is one of the themes in Apollo's Wish and Pluto's Dream Quest. We want to talk about how it shows up for children, how it affects them, and what we can do to build spaces where every child feels safe, seen, and empowered. I'm so happy for our time together.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Excited to kick off talking about this conversation because it's hitting home with us having anti-bullying month here at my school right currently.
Awesome. You began your work with students by developing relationships and removing barriers to their success. What first inspired you to become a school counselor, and what did you see in children that made you know this was your path?
Well, I have to be honest that I started my career as an elementary school teacher in Baltimore City public schools and thoroughly enjoyed my time there, but was finding myself not teaching math and reading as much as building the relationships, spending the time getting to know my students and their families, and trying to fulfill the needs that they had. And so when I kind of started realizing that my grade book was not as full as it should be. I started kind of thinking social work, maybe more for me, but really I love the school environment. I wanted to stay within a school setting. And a lot of the time social workers are working for child protective services or working for places that they're seen in a negative light, and I knew I didn't want to be in the negative light. And so I started my master's program for school counseling, and really it just kind of took off from there. I was really fortunate to really love the program that I started and felt like I was in the right spot. I saw a lot of needs like within my time as an elementary school teacher, and then while I was doing my master's I was still teaching, and I just saw that the littlest things you could do made a big impact, and just like a caring and friendly smile could achieve like such a big impact. And I kind of always have had this really strong belief in children. I've always enjoyed children's energy and just feel like they are our future. And so if they can be influenced right now, and I feel like at such a young age that they can also be influential in their futures. And so that's kind of why those beliefs that I've had have carried on through my work now 10 years as a school counselor. And, and I'm hoping to continue. Those beliefs have just strengthened as my years have gone on.
That's wonderful. It's great that you had the opportunity to work with them and make a difference. I especially think that the social emotional learning is an important part of our education. As we're preparing children for adulthood, those are some of the things that are definitely going to come up and pay off over the years that they have those abilities as well.
Yeah, I think holistic learning is the way to go, and I finally feel like, unfortunately, that's what came out of COVID a little bit in the education system, is that they realized the importance of that social emotional learning, and just the importance of not just physical health but mental health is such an important aspect of children and families, and ensuring that their well-being is strong, because they can't learn if they have other things going on that are not being addressed.
Exactly. Can you explain what bullying is and signs to look out for?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we always get this, it's an interesting balance as an elementary school counselor, because there, are students that are rude and mean to other students. And we typically will, get calls from families or have students report that bullying is occurring, and then an investigation usually occurs of the situation. And it's ruled out that it's bullying, not that it's right that the another student has been mean or rude to them, but we really do try to focus on the definition of bullying as, these actions or things that are being said are done on purpose. They are done knowing that they're mean and rude, knowing that they're gonna hurt someone, whether it's physically or emotionally. And these actions are done repeatedly. So whether it's happening daily, once a week, on different platforms, in different ways, it's happened repeatedly. And that person that's being bullied is starting to really feel less or weaker than the person that's doing it to them. There's this power imbalance, is how I like to say it. The person really feels that they aren't as strong, or aren't as good, or don't have as much power as the person that's doing this to them. And those three things can happen in a lot of different ways. We talk about in elementary school, like there's physical bullying where your body's being hurt, or someone's doing something physically to you, taking your things, picking on your appearance, that sort of thing. There's also verbal bullying, which also can be picking on your appearance, but just saying things that are, mean and rude, really kind of put you down every day, and they're using their words to hurt you. And then there's social bullying, where they're really isolating you. There's situations where they're out of the friend group, or they no longer are included, or they're not included in the birthday party that everyone in the class is talking about. Things like that, where the social isolation starts to happen. And usually there's one person that's kind of leading that social isolation, and that would be the bully victimizing someone. And then lastly, the biggest one that's occurring these days is cyberbullying. And I always tell my students that, anything they put out there online needs to be what they would say to their grandmother or their mother. It shouldn't be something that you feel like you can hide behind, because I think that's where we find a lot of the cyberbullying's happening, is students are saying things to each other, children are saying one thing to another, even over a video game chat or things like that. It comments on social media and things of that nature, where students are saying things that they never would actually say in person to that person or to someone that's older than them. And they just carry it on because they're getting a lot of comments, they're getting a lot of likes, they're getting some laughs. And the cyberbullying is really what's perpetuating a lot of this bullying. And it's easy to do. It's easy to click submit on a comment or post or things like that. And so the cyberbullying is we're really seeing a lot of bullying come through that facet. And then sometimes if they are at the same school or same location, or they're within each other's proximity, the other types of bullying can kind of start to occur too, especially that social bullying. I feel like when you think about signs of a student being bullied, or wait things to look out for, a student's withdrawal, just totally withdrawn, whether they lose interest in an activity that they really were loving, they don't want to go to sports practice anymore or dance practice anymore, their appearance starts to change. They no longer love that hat they used to wear all the time. They want to get a haircut. They're really always worried, like looking in the mirror kind of thing. Like, what do I look like? What, what is someone going to say about what I'm wearing today? I have students that I've, worked with in the past that will wear the same outfit day after day because they know if they fully wear a black outfit and their, Jordan Nike shoes, that no one's going to say anything about their appearance. So they don't need to worry about it. And that's kind of a trigger in my mind too, because it's like, well, are you not changing your clothes? Like, do you need something? Is something wrong at home? Oh no, I just know no one will make fun of me in this outfit. And so those kinds of comments and things start to stick out. Just an overall negative mindset, like, I can't do this. I'm not doing this. You start to see that's kind of in their academic performance because they just kind of like they're in that withdrawn state. So they're kind of staring aimlessly in class, maybe, or even at home with you. You feel like at the dinner table, they're just lost in their thoughts a bit. And whatever they're saying or doing about themselves is super negative. The last two signs I would say, and these are two that, I really focus on as a school counselor, is school refusal. Attendance is something that I, as a school counselor, work a lot with and kind of pride. We've made a lot of growth at my elementary school in our attendance data. And I think attendance, school refusal is one of those things that is a telltale sign. That's where they're interacting with a lot of children at one time. And so if one kid is not attending school like they were at one point, it kind of sends a signal to you like something's changed. And so I track our attendance data close enough that I can kind of see that. And I'm like, wait a second, they're not coming to school like they were. Or something's happening, or a parent may call and say, I'm having a really hard time getting them on the bus in the morning or out of the car in the morning, that sort of thing. So that can trigger something too. And then lastly, I work really closely with my school nurse, fortunately, and the physical symptoms start to come out too. And some of those symptoms start to be anxiety almost because they're so worried about what other people are going to say, what their day is going to look like, what's going to happen today, what are they going to do to me today that maybe is going to be really mean. And so kind of anxiety starts, and then the physical symptoms start of the stomach aches, the headaches, the lack of appetite, they're not eating, their blood sugars having an impact as well. So the physical symptoms really start to kick in too, unfortunately.
Yes, as you were describing bullying, I was thinking about some of the symptoms of anxiety as well. I appreciate you breaking down such a complex topic in a way that is really accessible and that can really give parents something to look out for to think that bullying might be taking place. So, for the parents and caregivers listening, what are three things they can do right now to support a child who might be experiencing bullying or feeling othered?
I think the first one is just to listen to your child. Listen to the young person in front of you. That's something that, I do a lot. Do, active listening where they know you're listening, you're asking questions, you're kind of giving them feedback so you can kind of reassure that you're hearing what they're saying. But just listen to them. Like don't interrupt them when they're going through things. Don't disagree even with things they're saying, even if they are pretty rational in the statements they're making sometimes, because everything they say is how they're feeling or what's on their mind, and so it all matters what they're saying. So I think the first thing is just to listen. Um, I would say the next thing is provide support and strategies for them that they could use independently because you like I was saying in my the first question, like you want to influence them and you want them to be influential later to be able to handle these situations that occur throughout their life. And so if you take the problem on yourself as the parent or caregiver, which we all want to do because we all care and we all have big hearts, but the best thing you can do is equip them with these strategies and supports of grouping together with friends and maybe confronting the bully or having going to that trusted adult wherever the bullying is occurring, whether it's happening at their sports practice or it's happening at school or it's happening even out in the community. Like, who is their trusted adult that they could even talk to and get them to help? Because I think a lot of kids these days are like, well, I don't want to be a snitch, right? Like, I don't want to tell that this is happening. So instead of them feeling like they're telling, then equip them with the strategies of like how they could confront the bully or how they could potentially get it to stop. I think the buddy system is always such a good approach. Never setting up a kid to confront the bully on their own, but maybe equipping them with other peers or things that may be able to help them confront the bully. And then the last thing I would say is just like I said, allow your child to take action on their own before you step in. But obviously, if things continue to get, you're feeling like it's not ending, these things are still continuing, I'm seeing my child really start to struggle, then step in. It's never, there's no place for you not to say something, or no place that's not going to listen to a concern, particularly in the school setting these days, where they're not going to want to hear the concern. And if the first person you tell isn't listening, and I always say this to students too, the first person you tell is not listening, or you feel like they're not hearing you and they're not supporting you, go to someone else, because there is someone in your line that is going to care enough to support this. So I think that the last thing is really just stepping in. If you're a parent, it's never too small. Yes, there's a million things happening in life, but it's never, this could really become a bigger problem.
Thank you for that. Yes, it can be dangerous for someone to feel that they're being bullied and not being listened to. And especially, you mentioned earlier the cyberbullying. I know there are cases where children have harmed themselves because they're suffering from bullying, whether it's the physical type that you described, or the social and emotional, or the cyberbullying. So I think it's so important, all the tools that you described, that parents, caregivers, and also children can use in these situations. I did want to give you a chance if you wanted to add anything else for children listening who might feel lonely, judged, or excluded. What message would you want them to hear?
This is actually kind of a new motto for me, but I really like it. And my principal that I'm currently working under has really been a huge impact on my career and who I am as a person. And I've worked with him in a couple different settings. And we had this conversation recently, and what he said was, the storm ends. And that's kind of what I would say to these kids that are being bullied. Like, the storm ends regardless of how long it is. It may feel really long. Like, this could be really dragged on. It could feel short. It could be really loud. It could be softer. Like, just like a storm, like, there's so many different forms that a storm comes in, the wind and the rain and a combination of all of it together. But the storm is gonna end. And life has phases. Unfortunately, these things happen, but life has phases. The sun is gonna shine again. We're gonna get through this, with help and support. And there's probably some cleanup, right, from the storm afterward, but you're gonna get through this. The sun's gonna shine again, and things can change. And that's why, just continuing to like, I want to continue to instill in all the children that there's hope out there, at the end. You don't need to end your life, harm yourself, harm others. There is solutions out there, and these phases are going to pass, and there's people out there that want to support you and other children to help the storm end.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that is a great motto to keep in mind for all kinds of things that we face, bullying and other challenges that we have in our lives that the storm passes. I'm going to definitely hold on to that one. You mentioned some of the examples of why people get bullied in terms of their appearance. And this is definitely what's happening in Apollo's wish and Pluto's dream quest. Pluto hears, your hair looks weird and you can't wear locks at school. While hair is one theme, the larger issue is about being judged and excluded. What comes to mind when you think about children being excluded because of something deeply personal, whether it's hair, appearance, or something else?
It's definitely a real thing that happens. The hair thing really resonated with me particularly. I mean, I've had so many students that wear their hoods all day long, right? They got a haircut. They don't like what mom or auntie did to their hair. And so yeah, I think that the hair is such a real topic for that kids will resonate with. And at times I think sometimes things are said or done unintentionally. I think that um like what they could be excluded, or something is said about their appearance, or something, like I said, is said unintentionally, but that's what wouldn't classify necessarily as bullying, because this person that's saying something or doing something is repeatedly doing it, and they're purposefully knowing that it's hurting your feelings. They're making fun of that new haircut. They're making fun of the locks. They're doing things that purposely hurt you. um and so I actually have found that inclusion kind of begins with other children's actions. Like eventually the student or the child experiencing the exclusion starts to self-isolate. They start to exclude themselves because that confidence and that power imbalance is real. And so they're like, I'm not worthy of hanging out with those people, or I'm not worthy of being around like these people. And that's how these, like, unfortunately, the suicide and self-harm things start too, because their worth really starts to be in question. Unfortunately, then a habit begins, and then you find the thing that was said that continuously was harmful and hurtful, then becomes like something that they believe about themselves, and the self-isolation becomes a habit for them, and it's easier for them.
Yes, in my story, that is part of what's happening with Pluto. He's ashamed to tell his mother that he's being bullied by his schoolmates. And so I see that as part of this self isolation that he closes off and keeps it to himself and lies and says he's sleepy, even though he isn't. He's really just worried and anxious and ruminating.
Yeah. That made me think too. One of the things I've experienced a lot is I work with a predominantly Hispanic population, that food is such a big thing for them, and hot lunch is such a big aspect of their day. And a lot of the parents, particularly moms and grandmas, bring in hot lunch for students. And I so many times I have seen kind of what you're talking about, is like they cannot say to grandma, I don't want that hot lunch anymore. I mean, that would just be devastating, and very like, very out of their culture. But at the same time, they will go from the office from picking up their lunch straight to the bathroom, dump the food in the trash can, and go back to the cafeteria. And so finally there was some kids I started noticing, that were doing that, and I finally said, "Well, do you want to eat that food, or and what's going on? Like, do you want to eat with me, instead, so you can have that food, but you don't feel as ashamed about it, in the cafeteria." And not necessarily that these kids were being bullied. It was just shame started to kind of set in, and giving them a space to be like, no, you can have this lunch with me. Like, the smell doesn't bother me, the appearance of it doesn't bother me, you know um it's sometimes like the other students, I felt like, I'm like, well, maybe they're a little bit jealous that mom or grandma's bringing you lunch and they're not getting it, and things like that. So kind of spinning it in a different way sometimes gets them like, you're right, like, I that's right, maybe I do need that. So the haircut, the hair thing is very similar to that. Sometimes it's spinning it in a different way, for them to see it in a different light.
Thank you for sharing that story and for creating that space for students. That is so powerful. I know that for one of my son's classmates, they their parent brings them lunch. I don't go often enough to know if it's every day. And I was thinking like how lucky, but I can easily imagine for a child it could be a very different experience. Maybe they'll appreciate it later, but being different can be so difficult and definitely could be a target for being bullied and teased.
Mhm.
While thinking about Apollo's side of the story, one of the powerful moments in the book is how Apollo uses his imagination and music to reach out and connect. In your experience, how can creative outlets such as music, play, art, or storytelling help children who are feeling isolated or bullied?
Oh, it can be such a help. I mean, very much a help. And I love that aspect of the story. I, art therapy and music therapy are a big thing. That a lot of children, that need that not like talking space, but need to be able to do something with their hands, to express themselves, really get into. And so that's what I immediately thought of with this question. But I also, it's just such a great way to express yourself and without saying anything. Sometimes I think it's like you said, it's hard to have the words come, right? Like they like you don't want to share what's happening to you, but they need some outlet. And I think that music and art and creativity, imagination helps with all of that. Tapping into the creative side of things really can release those endorphins that they need to to have the mood booster, like kind of have that like boost in their day and energy level. And so it's kind of like a type of medicine, honestly. And I fully believe in it. I have a lot of students sometimes come to my office that aren't ready to talk, whatever, regardless of what happened, whether it's something at school or home. But if you put a piece of paper in front of them with a pencil or some crayons, it's amazing what they come up with. Kindergarten to fifth grade, they will draw what's on their mind. Sometimes it's relevant to what may have happened, and sometimes it's just how they're feeling about themselves or their day. And so I think it's a really important aspect, and finding that doing the art and having music and things like that, like finding that commonality with other kids can also be something like you're building community. So then that child who was really feeling isolated from the group, maybe experiencing bullying, or felt like they were the only children that were being bullied, or their parents were being divorced, or they were going through grief, then they're like, wait, you're drawing that too? Wait, you're feeling this way too? Oh, and that's kind of how powerful it can be, is they start to find this commonality within each other, and it builds belonging, it builds friendships, and ultimately like gives them, like I said, releases those endorphins and gives them somewhat of a boost.
That's excellent and definitely a great way to build friendships and community. I think about what the first few years of school were like for my son versus now. And one thing that made a difference was finding a common love for Dogman books,
Yeah.
as well as Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And coming together on those things, he's had some friends at school, boys and girls as well, who love to read and love video games, and they've really bonded over those things. So, yeah, I think it can be a great way, just finding these things that people have in common. Great way to come together as friends and support one another. So, it went from some experiences of bullying in his first few years to now having a really solid friend group.
Yeah, and that makes a huge difference. And I also like we have an after school program that's a music club, and it's always amazing to me the kids that join the music club. It's kids you don't necessarily expect to join the music club, and they love it. And kids that are very shy, but all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're performing in front of everyone, and it gives them this like boost, and almost like takes them out of reality a bit. I think because I don't know if they're hide feel like they can hide behind the instrument, or they can kind of like put on this different persona, but it really can take them out of their reality. And honestly, sometimes I think kids need that break for a minute.
Absolutely. I think music is powerful beyond what we even understand right now. I think it absolutely can transform. So I was thinking about academic performance as being the typical focus at school, but you have emphasized social and emotional well being and community as important as well. What are some of the most effective approaches you have seen for creating a school culture where bullying is less likely and compassion is more likely?
You know, I have a lot of responses. I have a lot of thoughts and could respond in a lot of different ways to this answer. The students go to school to learn, and that's paramount. But as I said before, students have to be available to learn and be able to access the learning. And some days students come in and they're not available to. Sometimes it's for many different reasons, and sometimes it's for longer periods of time than even I sometimes would like to support them through, but that's what they need. And so I we pride ourselves. One thing that we have had a focus on at my school, and it seems to be catching on, is growing the sense of belonging for students. You have to have some kind of sense of belonging in environments. Children have it at home, but you have to have it in the environments that you enter and that you spend time in to be able to exceed and be able to achieve and learn and be yourself. And so if you don't have that sense of belonging, then you're really lacking in those areas. And I feel like one thing that has been something that we've really focused on is growing students and honestly our entire community, parents, caregivers, teachers, their sense of belonging to our school. And we've done it in such simple ways, like everyone getting a t-shirt. I mean, it's simple, but it really does stand out. On Fridays, everyone wears the t-shirt, right? And so you can't, it builds that community like, oh, you are wearing the t-shirt and I'm wearing the t-shirt. And like, that means we all like are a part of this, right? And
Hmm.
so little things like that. The other thing too is like, like I said, our a lot of our population is Hispanic, and putting the language in Spanish. So it's that we say like nosotros somos, like you belong, like we all belong. And so the language is, it just matters. That kind of goes back to my original thought, is talking about these things, like talking about bullying, talking about how we interact with others, how we interact with our feelings, those sort of things. Like those are all important things that bring about that sense of community, and then have influence on bullying, and it kind of lessens bullying because they have this sense of belonging. I would also say that, like, we have monthly virtues at school that we focus on, and the teachers have community time that they teach about the virtue, and we recognize students each month for displaying the virtue. And so the virtues I'm talking about are like teamwork, perseverance. Right now we're in kindness and anti-bullying month. So who are the students that are really those upstanders that are
Yes.
standing up for others? Empathy and responsibility are our last ones. And then we cycle through them again. So they kind of get a double dip every school year of those. And it really has grown our sense of belonging, and they're almost like community agreements. It's kind of like that's how we treat each other here, and that's how we act. That's how we know that we're a part of the school, because this is how we're treating others, and this is what we do. And I think that that's one thing that really has like helped with the growing up community school culture, and it taps into that social emotional learning, of course, as well.
I'm imagining your school children as seeds, like you're planting it now and they're going to burst forth and go into the world with all these wonderful social and emotional skills and change the culture far beyond school. Hopefully, change the
I
culture
really
in
hope
the
so.
world. I hope
But
so too. We need that. We need more of that. When a child is bullied, it affects not just them, it also affects their friendships, their willingness to go to school, like you mentioned before, their sense of belonging, like we're talking about now. And with your experience reducing suspension rates and improving attendance, how do you help shift the conversation from punishment to connection and healing?
I think fortunately where we are, where a lot of school systems are, and at least where Montgomery County is we're really trying to focus on those restorative approaches to when harm is done, whether it's bullying or what if it's behavioral. It's really like trying to repair the harm, and mediate, help them communicate with each other in a positive way, whether it's an apology or whether it's them talking out a situation, but the adult helping facilitate that conversation. And sometimes it's we have to it's it that takes away from the punitiveness of this. It's like, we can work through this together. We can find common ground. And there's obviously students and situations that we don't mediate. We don't think that that's the best option, is to put them in front of each other, for various reasons. Maybe it is a bullying situation, but writing the student a letter, having them apologize in different ways,
Mhm.
and just restoring the harm in some capacity that's appropriate for that situation. And a lot of times with bullying, they don't want to sit in a room with the bully, the kid that's been being mean to them on repeat. So sometimes it's having them show acts of kindness in other ways. And these things need to be monitored too, with as adults, like supervised their interactions for quite some time. Attendance is really a way, like I said, to have, get in with the family. Like, there's been so many situations that have arisen just from us bringing the family in to talk about attendance. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh my gosh, well, we have been having so many struggles with getting them to soccer practice, and then the soccer practice turns into this big struggle, and then we feel like we need to punish them at home, like give them a consequence because they didn't go to the soccer practice that we paid for. And then it's like, well, do we ask them why they didn't want to go to the soccer practice? And so it really, like, these little minor, like, conferences that all started based on because we realized the student wasn't coming to school consistently, then
Mhm.
it's this whole other conversation that comes from it. And I feel like having the school level meeting and us having a supportive stance as a school and saying, like, how can we help, like, what's going on, like, we care and we want to help, and we notice these things. Um and then also, like, school approaches, like, school level approaches, it can be really helpful too, is like having those lunch bunches, showing them that other students, like, want to be with them, and they miss them when they're not in school, or they have noticed that they've been kind of more sad and things like that. Like, I have a lot of lunch bunches and, like, little social groups that I do. And I just think that, like, those little things, like, even the teachers, we're like, hey, like, they're really struggling to get to school in the morning. Like, I've had teachers, come out of the class to greet the student at the school door, right? Because that is going to
Yes.
make a difference, right? um having just having making sure that that recess teacher that they didn't really ever realize that was watching them is watching them. And we've made many times, my principal and I have made connections with the recess staff and students and saying, hey, this is Miss blah blah blah, and this is whoever the other student is, and, like, we need to make sure that you guys know each other, because if something happens, this is who's going to help you. And those little connections have really made a big difference when these situations do arise, and a student, feels like they're being bullied, or there is bullying occurring.
Yes, caring and connection is so important. I really like the ideas you're describing. For me, I'm still in touch with some of the teachers from high school, thanks to the wonders of Facebook.
Hmm.
And I let them know about the book. So, my history teacher, for example, and my English teacher, I told her, I remember learning about similes and metaphors and symbols. And when she gets to read it, let me know if she sees any of those in there. So, building these connections now really can have a lasting effect. I have also seen, maybe on social media, the idea that detention could be replaced with nature walks, and how it can make a difference for children who are put in detention to take that time and with the teacher or the school official who's otherwise going to be monitoring detention, to take them on a walk and how over time it can really help the children to improve their behavior in a way that they don't need detention again. So I really like hearing about these different approaches that you're taking at your school
Mhm.
to help children feel more connection and caring. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think the last thing I just wanted to mention too, is that this stuff doesn't happen alone, and I kind of said that in my last response, but like it takes a team, and like we
Mhm.
have a student well-being team, and I'm very fortunate for that team. I lead that team, and I'm very proud of them and all the work we've done, and all the connections we've made. But it takes the cafeteria worker, and it takes the recess staff, and the bus driver, and it takes all
Mhm.
these adults really understanding what we want to make our school culture like that, growing that sense of belonging, making sure they understand that, and also getting them the t-shirts too, and making sure
Yes.
that they feel like they have a sense of belonging so they can give that impact to the kids too. And like you said, like those approaches that were never thought about when you and I were in school are making a huge difference in the learning environment and students wanting to come to school and having feeling like a less punitive punishment when things don't go right in the school.
Absolutely. And it's important to know that even when someone makes mistakes, that they are still cared for and that one still wants connection with them. So building those relationships in the good times, I think, helps with the hard times too.
Yes, definitely.
In my book, Apollo and Pluto build a friendship that changes how they feel about themselves. How important are peer relationships and friendships in helping children recover from the hurt of bullying or exclusion?
I think they're everything. I think that at school age, especially my fourth and fifth graders that are approaching middle school and at that secondary level, like friendships are everything at that age. And they are the peers then become those who are influencing them. It's less away from the family and away from the caregivers and parents, and it's really more on the friends. And so in recovering from situations like bullying and students feeling not included, like finding those connections, those commonalities with other kids is going to be so important because those students can be themselves and dress how they want to dress, and the other kids are also doing that because that's the commonality that they've found. And I think as adults, like we want to save, we want to support, we want to swoop in, but sometimes I think that we don't realize that we aren't actually the influence at that age as much as those peers are. And so allowing those like that's why supporting and giving those strategies are important because they don't want mom showing up at recess to approach the bully, right? And so or they don't want grandma to be able to get on social media and say something to call out the bully. Like that's not what's
No,
happening. It really is those other peers that are either standing up for people, they're being the upstander, or they're the friends that are boosting them up. I can tell, a student a million times, "Oh, you're so handsome. Your haircut's so handsome. You're what a beautiful dress you have on," and give them compliment after compliment and positive affirmation after positive affirmation. But they reach an age where, they may like to hear it. Sometimes I think some of my students are like, "Oh goodness, please stop." But it really becomes the peers, what the peers are saying about what they're wearing or what they're doing, and that are way more influential than what us adults are saying to them.
I absolutely agree. What gives you hope about how children's experiences with bullying and exclusion are changing in schools today? And what change would you like to see next?
Fortunately, I think there are policies that are starting to take effect. I know even with the Montgomery County school system, like we have a procedure. If bullying is reported, Anyone can report bullying. It can be a self-report, it can be from the family, it can be from a teacher. Anyone has access to the form that they can complete and submit, and report bullying. And then there has to be a follow-up of an investigation, of what the situations have been, and an action plan of like what's the action that's going to be taken, based on what was reported. And even if it's not found that the situation or report may be bullying, there's still action that needs to be taken because there was harm done in some way. So I feel that is one thing that's shifted, that there are like starting to be processes and things that are taking these things more seriously. And we're realizing, unfortunately, after some terrible situations with bullying and students taking their own lives and that sort of thing, that it was necessary. We needed to take these things seriously. It was really impacting our children, and impacting their futures. And so I think just those conversations about bullying have increased. It's something that, is talked about a lot more. It's some, just like I am doing this month, at our school, of like, running a whole school program, at the beginning of the month, and then following up within the classroom about bullying and situations that arise, and being an upstander and how we can do those things. These conversations and learning are occurring more. And I think that's really hopeful, because I think when we can call something by name, then students feel more comfortable calling it by name too. Because when we aren't saying what it is and aren't fully transparent, then I think there's like shame attached to things. But
Yes.
when we're calling it by name and saying what it is, then it's less shameful. It becomes more of like a norm. And then honestly, I just feel like, as much as social media can be a lot, there is a lot of like role models and student influence out there that's really positive. That I think students, like, there's, the YouTubers and those sort of things that are shedding light on bullying and what to do, and if you find yourself in these situations. And like we said before, like, that's what our students are listening to. That's what they're, that's who's influencing them. And fortunately, I think
Yes.
there's been a lot more positive role models that have shown up to talk about these things. And so I'm hoping that, if that's the outlet that our kids are growing up in, that's who's influencing them, then I hope it's positive. Obviously monitoring what they're watching and the rabbit holes they go down. But I think that there is a lot of positive role models and influencing out there happening. And by books like
Absolutely.
this.
Yes, I really do believe this book will help open up conversations between parents and their children, maybe for a child who can read it, maybe a bit older. It's for ages 4 to 8, but maybe more on the 8 or up side. That that connection that they may or may not have in person, that they could have with the book, and open up conversations with their parents if they have been excluding themselves. And also just to see someone who is like them, someone else who gets bored or maybe gets bullied or has some grief because they're moving or some changes are happening with their grandparents. I really hope that this story touches a lot of people.
I think picture books are just like the most fabulous way to have social emotional learning occur and have those conversations occur. I have a lot of parents that, ask, how do I even approach this conversation? And I'm like, well, let me send you a few books. Because,
Mhm.
I even had a family recently that was like, how do we approach talking to our child about their diagnosis of ADHD? And I'm like, honestly,
Mhm.
I think that normalizing it and showing them that, like, there's picture books out there about these things, like it's not just a you thing, like this is a real thing. And it's not just like, unique to you. Yes, you're unique, but these things occur, and it's, others are dealing with this too. And I think that's like exactly what you were saying about this story is they're gonna find children see themselves in these lights. Whatever you're reading to them, they tend to be able to put themselves in the story. And it's a really cool and fascinating experience when students do that, because you're like, I that was not even the direction that I was planning to go with this conversation or with the lesson that I did around this picture book, but here we are, and I'm glad you found some connection.
Absolutely. And I thought it was important to include the perspectives of both boys to also show that in friendships and in interactions, one person might experience something differently from another and have a different interpretation of the same set of events. And so it's the two stories in one to show those different perspectives and to help build empathy. So I really like what you were saying earlier about, this storm will pass. What music do you listen to uplift your mood while you're waiting for these storms in our lives to pass?
So I have to be honest with you. I do really enjoy country music, but I'm just a music fan in general. So this question, like I had to think about it, and I never cannot smile or dance or do something when Can't Stop the Feeling comes on from the Trolls movie, the Justin Timberlake song.
Yes,
It's one of those songs that just like regardless if you're like, not feeling it the day, you still kind of hum along and you end up finding yourself like, moving a little bit and getting in a different groove. And so, um, that song particularly, I like love and I will put on for kids sometimes too. And we'll dance around because I think movement is important as well.
I'm
Um,
dancing right now just thinking about it. Now you got that song in my head.
I know, I am sorry. And then this one's gonna be really stuck in your head because I am not a huge Swiftie, but I do think Taylor Swift can be a positive influence and Shake It Off also
Oh
always
yeah,
comes to mind. So
that's a great one.
I also play that one a lot. And
Uh-huh. Yeah.
gets me moving and grooving too. I what we were talking about earlier with music and art and being creative, music, can do such wonderful things and get those endorphins going. And then if you add movement to it, then you're really getting those endorphins going. And so those two songs stuck out to me because they kind of do both. They give you really
Yes.
good like have really good themes to them and they have really good lyrics to them that are positive and uplifting, but then also they like have the beat and the groove that you're gonna, get moving.
I know what I'm going to be playing when we're done talking today.
Sorry, they're stuck in your head now.
Oh, no, that's good. It's more like you reminded me of these great songs that I can't help but smile. I can't help but move when I hear them. And I'm looking forward to playing them as soon as we're uh, done with our
Whitney Houston's
conversation today.
always in the back of my mind too.
Oh, she's such a talent. Was such a
Um,
talent.
so I always then she comes in my brain too. Because
Is there a
I can
favorite song?
I oh my gosh, I can't name it right now, but it's the one I could start singing it.
Oh, please do. Absolutely.
um but it's the one like it's all right, it's okay, like the one that it's gonna
Oh,
work out.
that's all
So
right.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So
know which
that
one
like
you mean.
always starts in my head too.
Uh-huh.
When
Yeah,
I'm in these moments of being like, oh, it's been a long day.
absolutely. No, these are all great. I need to put together a playlist. So this is my final question for you that I ask all of my guests. In my book, Apollo experiences loneliness and Pluto has trouble with bullying, but the kindness they find in each other help them both to heal. My final question for you is, what makes a good friend?
I definitely think someone that's a cheerleader for you, that can boost you up and kind of knows the things to say that will do that. But also like is there when things are not so great. And they're there to listen. I think a good friend is someone who listens well and is empathetic and cares about your feelings. And is gonna be there through all those storms. Um,
Yes.
I think that um, obviously having commonality is a nice addition to a friendship too. But I don't think it's always necessary to have all these things in common with someone to be a good friend to them. I think kindness and smiling. I always say, a smile can do everything. A smile says a lot. And I think a smile starts a friendship, and, laughter makes it better. And then listening kind of, makes it all, kind of seals the friendship. And so having that cheerleader that's going to listen to you and boost you up and be there, is what you should look for in a friend.
I agree, and that's wonderful. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I really enjoyed our conversation. I learned so much, and I'm going to have a lot that I can use and apply.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that those songs can be played and on your the days that you need them to.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can order Apollo's Wish and Pluto's Dream Quest at vivinsmedia.com or through your favorite retailer or by supporting your local bookstore and requesting it there. This is Dr. Mia Rowe signing off. For my little one and all the big dreamers with big imaginations, keep dreaming.